what I'm going to attempt to explain in the next 8 minutes, which sounds stupid, is what I think is one of the most important elements of commercial strategy, and one that can ensure that you, as a drinks founder, as a founder of a business, can be the master of your own destiny. So, as you'll hear from many of my co-panelists, and as you can see when you're out at BCB, anyone who's been here for the last, I think, is it 10 years it's been running now? The business of booze is very, very busy. 10 years ago, if you were an entrepreneur and you'd started a drinks company and you got a bottle on a back bar, it probably gave you sales. When Saint-Germain first popped up in the market, it was on a back bar. People would buy it because they'd say, what's that? I'll have one of those. But now your average back bar doesn't have 20 bottles. It has 100, or if you're in a cocktail bar, 300 or 400 or even 1,000. So the back bar no longer means volume sales, unfortunately. Don't get me wrong, being on a back bar is really useful. You know, it's definitely a step in the right way. But if you want to make solid sales of your modern crafts, independent booze brand, then being on menus and being what we call premium upsell are the only places you're going to make real volume. So that's about solid sales. Next up, we're going to talk a little bit about velocity. So what is velocity in drinks? It's an American term. It's not so commonly used over here, but in a very simple form, it's the number of bottles you sell per month divided by how many accounts you are in. And in the US, they use it as a great way to figure out how you're performing in a city or a market. You could use it for a country if you're in Europe. So I've worked with hundreds of different founders, and for me, the most important commercial knowledge that they have about their brand is detailed knowledge of the velocity in different kinds of accounts. So how does your brand sell in a cocktail bar? How does your brand sell in a restaurant? How does your brand sell in a neighborhood bar? What makes it sell more? What makes it sell less? Those tiny, tiny pieces of information that sound like castaway comments are the absolute nucleus of you knowing how to affect the growth of your brand. And why is this so important in this context? Because it allows you to create real sales forecasts. Let me explain. So, to create a real sales forecast, there are 4 bits of information that you need. They're not always easy to come by, but first I'm going to explain what they are, and then I'll talk a little about why they're not so simple to get. So first up is your rate of sale. The rate of sale is how many bottles you're selling per month. It's a pretty standard piece of jargon in corporate booze. It's probably less so in independent booze. So it's how many bottles you sell in one outlet per month. And it's a crucial part of your understanding. So first choose one type of account, say a cocktail bar, and you want to know how many bottles you're selling a month, whether you're on a cocktail menu, if you're on the like a specials of the month or that kind of menu, or whether you are the premium upsell from a house pour. So if you're the upsell for gin or the upsell for rum. So then, because you might have one account which does really, really well for you, a cocktail bar that sells 30 bottles a month, you need to find out if that's really the truth, if all cocktail bars that you're on a cocktail menu are going to do 30 a month, because it's probably not true. So you want to then have a look at that rate of sale. How does it differ from account to account? So maybe pick up 3 different cocktail bars. You've got one which is selling 15 a month, one that's selling 5, and one that's selling 10. Your average is going to be 10 a month. Okay? So now you know how much booze you're selling in a cocktail bar on average when you're on a cocktail menu. Another piece of information you need. So how does it differ between different types of bars? You know, like I said, you know, how your product, if you're a vermouth brand, how you sell in a restaurant might be very different to how you sell in a neighborhood bar. Just the same way if you're a craft beer brand, how you sell in a cocktail bar is going to be very different to how you sell in a restaurant. So trying to learn what is that rate of sale in different kinds of accounts when you're sold in different ways. Complex enough? And last but by no means least, you need to know how many accounts your sales team or salesperson or you can actually visit. What's the physical capabilities of you? Most businesses, most well-organized larger businesses will operate off the premise that one salesperson can probably have a meaningful relationship with 50 accounts. That's about the max, roughly 50. Some will say they can do more, but I doubt they're having meaningful relationships that generate cocktail listings. So, once you have this wonderful set of data, you can start to build a sales forecast. However, getting this information can be really difficult, which is why a lot of people just don't bother with this step in their business planning. and apologies if I upset anyone on my panel or anyone in the audience, but distributors don't often want to give you real sales data. They can do if you have a great relationship. I have a great relationship? We do, that's great. I don't have a brand. You'll always give that data to me. You hear that? He's always going to give me the data. But sometimes they don't. Sometimes they don't for a variety of reasons. They don't want you to give your sales data to other competitors in Europe. They don't want you to go and access those accounts directly without going through the sales team. A whole myriad of paranoia, generally. But you can get that data without being from the distributor. You can get anecdotal data from bar managers. They can tell you how many bottles are being sold a week. They can check their stock list. You can speak to the distributor's sales team and say, which of my accounts, do you know how much roughly they did last week? They'll have access to that information. You're not looking for cold, hard, like massive amounts of data. You're looking for anecdotal but honest data. And you could also speak to brand ambassadors. So all those people could be sources of finding bits of information from that last page. So get the data, and then the fun begins. So, the example I'm going to try to show you here, by the way, this is all going to be filmed, so if you're missing stages of this is all going to be filmed. You'll be able to look at this on parkstreetuniversity.com, parkstreet.com. Yeah. So first I'm going to talk you through this format just to get you used to it, and we're going to build on this over the next few slides. On the left is the types of accounts that you might target. So we've got cocktail bars, for instance, restaurants, and neighborhood bars. And all the numbers in this example are going to be a gin brand that's operating, it was operating in Berlin last year. So they're real numbers, but I can't tell you who they're from. So then in the middle column are the ways you could promote that drink. So like I talked about earlier, it might be on a cocktail menu, it might be special of the month, it might be on an aperitif menu, different ways that you can promote the drink that aren't just on the back bar, actively selling your product in a bar. And then on the right-hand column is the rate of sale, the number of bottles they're selling a month. So next we'll add in 12 months for the year, because generally when you're writing a sales forecast, you want to write it for 12 months. You might want to write it for 18, but I think 12 is probably a good place to start if you're in the early days. Some of your investors might want longer plans, but for me, like 12 months is a really good start. And then we're going to add in the number of accounts that I want my salesperson to target. So in this case, the salesperson was targeted with adding one account every month. So in January, he had one account. February, he had two, and so on and so forth, up to December, where he had 12 accounts. And that target was getting on cocktail menus in cocktail bars. So if I know that my rate of sale in a cocktail bar is 20 bottles, and I know that my sales guy can get at least one new cocktail menu every month, then over the course of the year, I know that a third of his time, roughly, or her time, roughly, is going to be spent getting me 1,500 bottles. Sounds good. But that's only a third of their time. What are they going to spend the rest of their time doing? So next up, I'm going to say, well, because I want my gin on an aperitif menu, I don't know why, but he did, and that aperitif menu roughly sells me 14 bottles a month. I know that, I've done my research, and that's what I can get. And my salesperson can add a bar a month again, and so I'm going to get to roughly 1,000 bottles out of really targeting just those 12 restaurant accounts. That's what I'm going to get for my year. And then last but by no means least, I really want to be in some neighborhood cocktail bars as well, or neighborhood bars. There, the rate of sale is slower. It's 6 bottles a month, but it's important for me because maybe I'm a local brand, and these are all the bars that are around my distillery or something like that. So I'm going to target them again with just building one account every month. Over the course of the year, that means I'm going to sell another 500 bottles, just short of 500 bottles. So there you have a 3,000 bottle sales forecast written from the bottoms up. So over the course of the year, 36 bars, like I said, one salesperson, you've sold over 3,000 bottles. But why is all this important? Why am I getting into this much detail on a Monday afternoon? A number of reasons. Understanding how your brand sells in different kind of accounts is absolutely crucial to you. It means you can adjust your strategy. It means you can adjust your marketing to suit. It puts you in control of how your business is running. The other thing is it means you can target your sales team well. Most people who are starting out might have one salesperson, they might have half of their own time. Maybe you're lucky if you've got 2 salespeople, but those are expensive people to have out there, as any of you who have salespeople will attest to. It's a €50,000, €60,000, or maybe in the US, $100,000. That's a huge amount of money coming out of your pot every year, so making sure you can make the best impact and value out of spending that €50,000 is imperative. Not just letting them go and sell to anyone. The third one, when you're trying to get investment, if someone says, how are you going to sell 3,000 bottles in the first year? If you just say, hey, I reckon we can do it, doesn't really fill them full of belief. But if you can tell me, I'm going after these 3 types of accounts, this is exactly the rate of sale because I know, because I've gone out and got my anecdotal data, and these are the 3 kind of accounts that I want to be in and that we're going to go and test in, that's a great answer. That's a really solid answer. It's a far more solid answer than most people will have in this industry when you ask them about investment. And last but by no means least is point 4. When you next write a sales forecast, you're not even basing it on assumptions you've already got. You're starting to build real strong knowledge about how your business performs in certain different accounts. And that bit for me is probably the most crucial. Like it says at the bottom here, your sales forecast, it will never happen exactly the way that you plan it. But the more knowledge you have, the better it will get. And without it, unfortunately, you're just guessing.